So in this video, I'm going to look at prompt engineering, which is one of the fundamental skills of using AI properly and getting the most out of it. So to start with, it's understanding what a prompt is. So a prompt is the term for a specific instruction that you give to an AI system, whether that be a ChatGPT style language model or an image generator or somewhere in the middle, any sort of multimodal model. So anything where you're giving it and you're writing an instruction and then you're giving it to the AI to execute, that instruction that you write is called the prompt. So why this is so important? So a prompt is the biggest single factor that determines the quality of the output the AI generates. Now, in a lot of the newer AIs, they have an element of thinking that goes on. So they take your question in and they try and effectively improve it and think about what you mean, and then it generally results in a better output. However, a lot of the older models are equally as capable. As long as you've designed your prompt in the right way, you can produce an incredible output. So as a teacher, it is sometimes obvious when people have used AI. So let's take report writing is a really big example of this. If you don't know what you're doing, any AI system is capable of producing bad outputs. And it all goes down to the user and how they've used it. If they've used it with the right prompts, they've given the right information, you will get very high quality outputs from an AI system. But it's equally, if you give it a bad prompt, you will get a bad output. So let's go over a couple of examples of use cases in education. Now, I'm going to do these away from the platform. This is general training. So if you take this and visualize it going into Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, any sort of AI language model, you could, for example, ask something like, make me a 10-question topic test on computer hardware. Now, I'm a computer science teacher, so that's why I've gone down this route in the example. But if I did that, my output, and this is an example, I won't say which one I use, but this is what was generated. Now, there's nothing wrong with what's come out, but it's not what I want. So that has generated, and I've only shown you a little bit of it, but that has generated a 10-question topic test. But because a lot of these AI platforms have learned from all the data on the internet is riddled with multiple choice tests and quizzes. So its default, unless you tell it specifically what you want, its default is, I'm going to make you a multiple choice test. Okay, so it's done that, but it's not particularly linked to my specification. It's not linked to the types of styles of questions that a GCSE student would do, for example, if that's what I wanted it for. So the reasons this is bad, it's too vague. I've not given it any context. There's no role, no examples, no audience, and I'll explain what all these mean. So a better example of a prompt is the one I'm showing you here. So act as a teacher. Your task is to design a 5-question topic test for GCSE computer science students in the UK. The test should cover this part of the specification, and then I did copy and paste a bit of a specification in. Ignore the fact it's not in here, it would have been too long to show you. Here are some examples of some questions and mark schemes to guide you on the style of questions the exam board produces. Copied and pasted a couple of questions and mark schemes. Please also make a mark scheme to go with the design question. So that is a much better prompt, and that resulted in a completely different output. So this is just a couple of the questions from the output. This is very, very similar to the style of questions that the exam board I was trying to produce this for, they do in the UK. It's followed the same style in the mark scheme, in the wording of the questions. They're following a similar mark amount, I would expect. And it's all because I gave it the relevant detail in the prompt so that it could answer the question properly. So the difference here is, first off, I gave it a task. I was very clear. Your task is to design a 5-question topic test. So because I gave it a task, it stuck to that task because I was clear. The role is one of the most important things in terms of benefit for effort. So in only a few words, you can say things like act as a teacher, act as a head teacher, act as a educational expert. That will completely change the output. So for example, let's say I was writing a letter to go home to parents. If I say act as a head teacher and review this letter, the resulting criticism or critique of the letter I would get would be completely different than if I just said review it. Because if it's trying to act like a person, it will try and take on that persona. So as a head teacher, the AI will probably think, right, my focus is going to be on parental view of the school, for example. So the feedback will be different. And again, it's just giving AI a role in your prompt adds a huge amount of value. Then you go down to make sure you give it enough details and context. I think, from my experience, one of the most powerful things you can do is give it an example. So if you say, I want to write a letter, give it an example of an old letter you wrote, and then say, please mimic my style. And it will try and copy your writing style, and it will be more unique to you. So examples are amazingly powerful. And then obviously give it an audience. If you say UK GCSE computing students, for example, again, the output will be tailored to that age. So to go over a couple more. Report writing examples. So you could say as a bad prompt, write a report for Jim Smith in maths. He's a good student who should do well overall and often behaves well in lessons. And it will produce a report. Now, this ends up being very generic. These are the sort of things that parents and teachers can easily spot people using AI to be lazy, because that has not been given enough detail to make a unique report about the student. And what you have to be really wary of is if you do not give AI enough detail for the task that you've asked it to do, it will start filling the gaps. So you might hear AI make things up. Like if you don't tell it enough about the student and you're asking it to write a report and you give it an example of quite a long report, it will generate something to meet that length. So it might say, Jim really struggled with fractions. That could not be true. It might be just completely made up, and that's where we've got to be careful. So bad prompts can lead to bad outputs. So this is too vague, lacks personalization, no tone, no role, etc., etc. So here's a much better one. So act as a teacher, write school reports for Year 11 mathematics students. You'll be given a list of student names, their gender, some unique bullet points about them. Your task is to turn that information into individualised and professional reports that will be sent home to parents. Your tone should be warm and personable. The report is written about each pupil, not written to them. Each report should be a maximum of 100 words and contain some mention of their achievements, a development target and some advice on how to achieve that target. Then you could go on to list the students, give contextual information about that student, observations you've made, etc. And what it will result in is reports a little bit more like this on the right. Much clearer, much cleaner reports, more professional, more personalised to each student because the teachers took the time to list unique facts and observations about them, etc., etc. So this as a prompt, I've given it a task. I've said write reports for this audience. I've said the role, act as a teacher. I've said the tone, do use a warm and personable tone. I've given it details. I've said who the audience is. It's going home to parents. All of these things will make a huge difference. And in this one, I didn't highlight it, but I did give an example report as well, which again will add huge value because people write reports in totally different ways. So just to show you that these skills I'm going over here, they apply to all AIs, not just like language models. So here is an example. Create an image of a close-up of a red maple leaf with veins and spots detaching from a branch with other green and yellow leaves against a blurred background of a forest in autumn in the style of nature photography. That is a very detailed prompt, but it resulted in exactly what I asked for. But it's about giving it the details, because if you don't, AI will just make them up. So that was very clear. I gave it a task, a style, and it followed it to the letter. So a couple of other examples. So you can now use prompts, don't just have to be words. So you can, if you've got a app like one of the famous language models, you've got an app on your phone, you can take a photo of something and ask a question related to the photo and have the photo be part of the prompt. Now this is quite scary when you think of education as well, on how students could use this to bypass learning as much as they could use it to help them. And I would say my experience with AI and students is very much on those lines at the minute, that it's widening the skill level in the room. Because I think if taught to use it well, I think it is an absolute game changer for learning skills deeper and quicker than ever before, because it can help personalise learning. But at the same time, if it's abused, a lazy student can use it to be lazy, and therefore they can completely bypass learning. And this is an example. If you give kids a worksheet, depending on phone policies and things, they could just take a photo of the questions and say these are the answers, and AI will do it. AI is that good, and it's getting better. And any issue you find with AI, you need to think this is the worst it's ever going to be. So because knowledge is so accessible now, we need to be really careful with how we interact with this. So the way I would use something like this is to try and get the students to interact with the mark schemes. So you could get some exam questions, get AI to answer them, and then get the kids to review and mark the different AI answers and discuss what was good and bad about the answers. And you will find that it's not always getting full marks because it doesn't understand the contextual information around that specification and things. So it makes for quite a nice activity. Things like this. So you could take a photo of something from a book or a worksheet. I'm a year 10 studying biology GCSE, and I need help with this diagram. Please can you explain in simple terms what each of the labelled things is for? So I was trying to pretend to be a student. And you'll see what's really cool about this is not only did it found all the labels and tried to explain it in simple language, it also highlighted a couple of things that weren't labelled that it thought were important, and it included that as well. So again, using images as prompts can be quite powerful. This was just me showing you could draw something on a piece of paper, and then you could get AI to take that drawing as an input and create an image from it. If you imagine the sort of creativity uses of this could be quite powerful. So this is something I've been dabbling with a little bit as well. And you can obviously also, as part of a prompt and asking a question, is upload a document. Now, as an example, I use this quite a lot, if I'm honest, but I don't use it to avoid reading. I use it usually to check I've not missed anything important. But here I took 2 different specification documents for GCSE computer science, one from a company called OCR and one from AQA. I asked it to upload and review the differences between the two and summarise them. And then I looked into those differences on each spec in more detail myself, but it saved me a lot of the original time. But again, I'm giving it enough detail to answer the question. I'm not just saying go away, what is the difference between these? I'm giving the specifications to it and asking it to review and summarise, which is really powerful. So the only thing to mention now is more, they're all hopefully useful tips around making sure you give enough information to an AI, but it's also understanding that most AIs now are becoming multimodal. So when they first started, a lot of the models we were interacting with were these language models like ChatGPT, where at the start it was text in, text out. Then you started getting voice in, voice out, and then you get an image generation in there and videos on the way. And it's going to be, you can talk and interact with these AIs in whatever mode you would like to, and you can get the output that you're asking for in any modality you'd like as well. And this is going to be incredibly powerful. You imagine from a learning perspective, you could get a video generator explaining how the heart works or anything like that, and this is all on the way. So just as a bit of a summary, an analogy that I quite like is trade for a great prompt. So this is, if you can only remember a few of the things I've talked about, trade I think covers the most important. So task, make sure you're very clear on the task you are giving an AI. Make sure you use a role, because for the sake of, say, 3 words, it can add a lot of power. Make sure you say who it's for, A for audience. D is for details, make sure you give it enough details. And what I feel is the most important is give it an example. So if you give it an example of something in terms of the type of output you would like, the level of detail and quality you get on the way is much greater. So I always try and say to people that just asking AI to do a job for you, it might get you 40% of the way there. For example, it can write a very good letter very quickly, but you've still got to use your human side, go over it. If you use examples of your old letters and you give it enough details, I reckon you can get AI to 80-90% of the way there on most jobs. Now, there's still the human oversight and the human review, But again, 89% from a time perspective is a massive time saver. And then my very last thing to finish off is just understanding that depending on the tool you're using, it's not a conversation. Sorry, it is a conversation. It's not a command. So you can give it an amazing prompt and spend ages, and then you might still feel, or I've missed something, or I accidentally forgot that part of trade or something like that. So you don't have to start all over again. These AIs have memory. They remember the conversation you're having. So you can just talk to the AI and help refine whatever it is you're working on. And make sure you treat it as a conversation, not just a one command and a command number two. They are interlinked, so you can develop things with AI. One of my biggest uses of AI is I use AI as a thinking partner when I'm working on things. So take this presentation for an example. I would use AI to say, I'm thinking of making a prompt engineering presentation. These are some of the things I think I'm going to include. So please, review those. Can you think of anything I'm missing that would be powerful? That type of thing. And I think it helps me produce higher quality things faster than I would have done before. So that's it for prompt engineering. I hope that was useful. And please watch this space, because we're planning on recording quite a few of these different little training videos just to give back. All right, thank you.